Welcome to my podcast series, The Best Thing to Design is You. This episode is called Post-Traumatic Growth. We hear so much these days about post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD. In many medical articles, the definition of PTSD seems to relate specifically to a life-threatening situation. In others, it's simply a traumatic event that occurred. Either way, it is a particular set of reactions that can develop in people who have been through a traumatic event. Right, I totally understand and empathize with these situations, for sure. But what I'd like to discuss is it possible to go through a trauma and come out the other side without triggers and a lifelong disorder? Do we fall into a trap today of desperately looking for a label or specific diagnosis so we can better understand what's going on? I mean, sometimes I think we do. If you've ever had that terrible experience of having something wrong with you and not being able to work it out and going from doctor to doctor and having all these different tests, it's understandable that when we get a diagnosis, we think, cool, now I know what I'm dealing with. I get that. I acknowledge that. But I often wonder, as modern day humans, why we need a label for everything we experience emotionally. When did that start? Why do we do this so much? With many problems today, once we get that label, we kind of accept it and own it and go, okay, that's it. That's me. I own that. I have that. Well, okay, but I'd like to offer a different idea, a much more proactive, sort of positive spin on this. Do you recall in that biographical movie, A Beautiful Mind, the Nobel Prize winner, John Nash, played by Russell Crowe, had paranoid schizophrenia. He had lots of different characters in his life that he interacted with on a regular basis. And he didn't really realize he was doing it. His wife finally brought it to his attention, but he wasn't sure. He was an absolutely brilliant mathematician. And he finally discovered one day for himself that the young girl he was speaking with never grew older. And he thought, I get it, there is something wrong. In this amazing true story, he actually made up his mind to control what he referred to in the movie as urges. So he overcame in his own mind this paranoid schizophrenia. Now that's an extreme example, and one could argue that he was clearly a brilliant person, so therefore maybe he had more mental strength, more power over his mind. We could argue that. But nonetheless, it demonstrates the power of the mind. For me, personally, I suffered a multitude of tragedies or traumas, all in the space of a few months. Life-changing events. Within my family, my husband of 20 years had a heart attack 1 month. The next month, we moved into our dream home. He then disclosed his infidelity, which was a complete shock and totally out of character. And a month after that, he took his own life. It's fair to say that was a pretty traumatic, terrible time, no doubt. I suffered all kinds of degrees of heartache and pain and confusion. Everything that I knew changed overnight. And of course, everything I saw was some kind of memory of him or memory of everything. And there was more to come. I ended up in a legal case and, of course, raising my child by myself. So many people, guys, I know suffer life-changing traumatic events, and probably even worse than that. I'm definitely not discounting any of that. However, I could argue if I had allowed myself, I could have had all kinds of triggers and labeled myself PTSD, and anything that reminded me could have been a trigger and therefore send me into my downward spiral. I didn't start and stop and say, I'm going to do that or I'm not going to do that. I just really got to work straight away, working on myself with a psychologist. I spent time, after about a year, exercising, releasing stress, and then I also started working the other side of my brain, doing the things I had relied on him to do before. And I started to realize that I was feeling stronger than I'd ever felt before. I was mentally stronger, I was physically stronger, and dare I say, smarter. I could do more than I had ever done in my life. So what happened? If anybody should be a candidate for PTSD, it might have been me. So one day I sat in my office and I started to write it down on the whiteboard. And I was like, what is going on? Why am I feeling so good? Is it just time? And I thought, well, no. There's a lot more to that. It's not just that time has passed and I'm feeling better. I've done a lot of work, and I'm writing PTSD on the board and thinking, I don't have that. Yeah, I've got lots of memories, but I have got, and I wrote PTG. I just made it up. I sat back and stared at it and thought, that's it. I have literally grown through this trauma. I have post-traumatic growth. Now, I thought I was coining a new phrase, and I was like, wow, that is so exciting. Then I did a bit of research, and lo and behold, it's all been done before, and there's a brilliant man that has discovered that already. So I thought it was an original idea. I don't care if it is or not. The fact that it exists is fine. But Richard Tedeschi, he's professor of psychology at University of North Carolina in Charlotte, has already discovered this phenomenon and done an enormous amount of work on the subject. Is not an original idea. Oh well. Others have experienced it too. Now, I'm not fussed that I didn't think of it. Instead, I'm actually delighted to share that others have discovered this. And yet, it's a label. But it's a label I created for myself. What it means is you can grow through trauma. We do. This is how we learn. It doesn't mean that people don't suffer or everyone feels amazing all the time, but it proves that it's possible to grow and not be stuck in a disorder for the rest of your life. What a hopeful thought. I believe it's a real thing because it happened to me. Nobody labeled me that. I discovered it myself after a lot of effort and hard work. And yet, of course, I still have memories. Sometimes I allow myself to give into it, and I'll see something that reminds me or think of something or hear a song. More often than not, I just go, nope, not doing that today. And I change the mental channel. I believe this is a choice if you decide that you want it to be. Post-traumatic growth does not mean that you never remember bad stuff. It means that you can grow exponentially through adversity to become stronger, brighter. We don't have to accept life-changing events as something we can't handle. We can grow from them. So here's a few steps to get you started. There's 5. Number 1, realize that you can. Number 2, decide that you want to grow and not be stuck. Number 3, tell those people that are helping you that you've decided to grow and you want their help. Number 4, recognize little changes along the way and just think, wow, I did that differently. You'll know when they happen too. Number 5, keep going. It might take some time. Remembering that time helps, but it doesn't heal. And lastly, and I'd like to just finish this off today by remembering this is not the stuff of superheroes or actors in a movie. This is the stuff of being human. I hope you enjoyed this episode and got something from it. If you want more information, go to debrapascoe.com.